Welcome back to the Valley. Today, I am your host, Janet Michael. We are on the Zoom today with Tyler Hinkle. Tyler is Shenandoah County's planner. We're talking about Shenandoah 2045, their comprehensive planning process. Tyler, we've been at this for what, a year and a half? But you've been at this a whole lot longer than what we've been talking about it on the radio. And it's been fascinating to me to learn what the process is like in creating or revamping a comprehensive plan. But I've also been really, really impressed with the intention of getting input and having engagement with the community. You have been out and about in the last year and a half asking anybody and everybody what do they think and what would they suggest and how do they feel about. It has been really impressive.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think we're coming up on 2 years of doing episodes. I think we started back in 2021. It's been a long process and there's a long process ahead, but I think we're lucky to be where we are, and we're excited to see what's going to come. And I think part of looking at that is sometimes looking at where we've been and where we're going, as the slide of my presentation show here says. I'm showing to Janet, and taking us back in time a little bit further than I might have said to Janet is the first meeting we had with the CAC on the comprehensive plan, which was in August of 2019. And in that meeting, we took up some documents that the CAC had drafted back in the early 2000s on what does it mean to be rural. And that's a question that's come up a lot in our engagement. A lot of people said they want Shenandoah County to be rural. What does it mean for us to be rural? And in this document, it states a couple things that I think are very important to highlight, which is that it includes a landscape dominated by farm fields, open pasture, and cropland, scenic mountains and ridges, and large tracts of woodland. Residential development does not dominate the landscape. Clean air, we have clean air, clean rivers, streams, clean edges to villages and towns, and dark skies. Suburban development patterns are not present. Historic sites and landmarks are preserved. Service areas with public water and sewer available, yet are compact with the small town atmosphere. This statement wasn't actually adopted into the plan, but I felt like it was the perfect way for us to kind of kick off about this discussion on what is rural, what's suburban. And on the screen, I have some images of, potential, suburban style locations where, people live in solely residential communities. You have to drive everywhere. Everything is built for the car, particularly. But what also is urban? If rural is one thing, is urban the antithesis of it? Is urban, being in New York City? Is it being in San Francisco or Chicago? Is it some futuristic world where we have trees growing on the side of buildings? And the CEC has constantly said that urban is something that is here and is necessary for us to keep our rural identity, because urban is, downtown Newmarket, it's downtown Mount Jackson, it's downtown Woodstock, downtown Strasburg, and on the screen, it's also downtown Sandwich, which is where it's the birthplace of the founder of Mount Jackson, or Zurich, which is the birthplace of the founder of Orkney Springs, or Strasbourg, France, which of course is the birthplace of the founders of Strasbourg. I had the chance to visit these places, and it's really interesting in understanding like how their urban form was then brought here by those early settlers, and it's a way for us to think again into the future of honoring those first ancestors, the first people who came here, and their way of development, and to say that we were once urban. On the screen is a picture of Forestville, which is a small village in Shenandoah County. But in Forestville, they once had a town hall where people in the village would come together and make decisions for the best of the community. And on the hill was their schoolhouse. They had a place for people to go dancing, a restaurant, their church. It was a community where you could walk everywhere and know everybody. But also in the middle of the community, they were raising chickens. They had farms. They had little gardens. It was a rural community, but built on small amounts of land. And that's also seen still today in our downtowns of our towns. One of the things we looked at when the CAC first started with the comp plan, was talking about the ideas of townscapes, these places that you can be in these dense communities, but then right on the outside, it's just open farmland, protected, beautiful views, something you might see and what most people would say, like in Tuscany or in Bavaria, very, beautiful areas where we both protected farmland, made it easy for you to walk around, and had a unique sense of character, so you didn't feel like anywhere USA. You were, Edinburgh, Virginia, you're Toms Brook, Virginia. You're unique in that sense. And that, in those places still, there is a rural identity. In downtown Mount Jackson, the area right beside Town Hall used to be the livestock lot where people would bring their animals and sell them along the railroad there or along Route 11. And so agricultural aspects are necessary for an urban place to exist, just as an urban for a rural place. So then, we went out to the community in 2021 to first let people know there was a comp plan, because a lot of people don't know that a comp plan exists. And in that, we heard overall that people want us to be a rural community with natural beauty, to have that sense of community, a small town feel, and make sure farming is still prevalent in the community. They, of course, still want to see improvements in our schools, things to do, as well as improving our roads and new businesses. In 2022, we went back out to the community and asked them in more detail what would they like to see for the county to be better. And overall, again, we heard we want new restaurants, places to go out to shop, new housing opportunities, access to the river, grocery stores, and that there is an extreme value in our downtowns, the look and use of historic buildings, public space, and the accessibility, including sidewalks. And part of that, again, was going back to this idea of what is rural, what is urban, what is suburban. And in our walking tours, we looked at typical development that occurred after World War II, which was extremely youth-centric. One place was designed in its own little pocket without any insight into how it ties into the larger community. You might, live in one cul-de-sac and then your best friend lives maybe 10 feet away, but because of the fence that was put in by the HOA, you have to drive all the way around to try and reach them, when it would be so much easier just cut a hole in the fence and walk over to visit your neighbor. And that, before then, the way our ancestors had built, downtowns of all of our towns, or even Forestville, the Connickvilles, the Fort Valley crossroads of the community, they were built to walk around, because either if you didn't have a horse or didn't own a bike, you had to walk. That was the only way you could get around. And so thinking again about that for embracing that identity that people really like, ways that we could find ways to infill places in town, as well as our research where we did a value per acre analysis, where we looked at what's the taxable value of a property, and then we divide it by its total size. And that's common for farmers. Are you going to plant soybeans, corn, sorghum, wheat? How much are you going to make on the acre? So how much are we going to make on the acre for a building being constructed? And we found that the most valuable land being developed, that was developed in the county, are in our downtown, or in our towns, and then after that are in our downtowns. And it's because they had small lots, they made the best use of the land, and it was compact, walkable, and dense. And again, with all this in mind, we did our survey as well. And in that survey, we heard that on the top aspects for the future of the county, that students should receive an education that prepares them for a well-paid job. They don't want Shenandoah County to become just like Northern Virginia, and they want to protect agriculture from disappearing. And the top aspects for all the chapters related to natural resources, and the bottom aspects of things that people particularly don't want to see are having more chain restaurants or chain stores, or having a lot of outdoor responsibilities or chores or things that takes away from your time. And when we asked people what they wanted to see for the future, as you all may remember from that episode we did, it was, a rural county with, dense development clustered in one place. And on the street, there was a lot of activity on the streets with shops. And so we just wanted to make sure, we've heard this again for 3-4 years of community engagement. we now have drafted the first draft of the plan. Are we actually getting it right? What's right, what's wrong, what's missing from it all? And to recap that again, so we engaged 102 people in 2021, around 800 people in 2022, around 970 opinions through our survey, and then 800 people again this year through our engagement. So we're looking at around 2,672 people. Plus, we got to get some input from high school students. So we're looking at pretty close to 3,000 people we've heard from directly, and thousands more through things like this radio show and Facebook and other types of ways we've done engagement. So this time we went out to 5 different festivals in the county. Overall, we heard that people were supportive of the draft of the plan, but particularly they wanted to see more statements put into the plan about protecting farmland. And to summarize this for each chapter, it's protecting our historic assets as a model for future, and using them as a model for future development. That water is a precious resource, and that we must plan for future water sources. That we should protect prime farmland, and we need to protect our natural green areas. That the right kind of industry can bring tax revenue and jobs, and we should focus also on revitalizing downtown. Housing should be affordable, habitable, secure, and near amenities. We need a community that promotes seniors, hosts music events, and has a variety of authentic restaurants. Schools are overcrowded in our Central and Stroudsburg campuses, and that we need proper space and amenities for quality education. We need to support response victims, have birthing options, and care for the disabled, retain employees and those who are aging in place, better self-service in the county, and more community and government involvement in software, increase river access, support for more trails and parks, and to reduce speed in our villages, that we might want to work on certain gravel roads, that people love Shenandoah, wanted to see it extended, and to see some ways to alleviate traffic on the interstate. So I'll kind of summarize the rest of what we heard as well through just a bit of a preference survey that we did. So we had different pictures and statements that people could rate what they liked, what they didn't like. And I think to summarize everything that we've heard of these past 4 years comes with this survey here, which is that out of everything that was out there, the top 3 things that people said they want Shenandoah County to be is rural, wilderness, and walkable. And those are 3 things you may not think ever would come together. But again, if we think back to the way our ancestors built, dense, compact communities where you leave agriculture to just be agriculture and it's not developed, we can see that there are ways that the people today are calling back to the people who lived here hundreds of years ago. And we see that again through each survey that people want us to be rural, wilderness, historic, urban, like our downtowns, but not to be suburban and not to be super urban, so not skyscrapers. They're talking about building on vacant lots and more growth in our downtowns where there's vacant buildings, but not on prime soils or floodplains or in the forests. And that our villages, towns, and hamlets should be walkable, historic, active, and unique, but not abandoned and not cookie cutter. So they need to have their own unique identity. And then the last part of those surveys was on transportation. We had 2 statements, 2 on transportation. One was that what types of shared transportation would you prefer? And overwhelmingly, people said Shenandoah. After that was some type of tourism transit. The next one we asked was, if you were the planner and you were given an $8 million budget, where would you put your funding in the community? And overwhelmingly, people put Shenandoah as the main option because with $8 million, it would allow us 576 miles of coverage with Shenandoah every year. After that was bike lanes and then paving gravel roads. At the bottom of that was new interstate, as it would cost $8 million to build 1 mile of interstate. We asked folks what they would like to see along the rail trail, and I think they want to see all types of amenities, but the top were just wildlife, viewing areas, historic markers, and overlooks. And then we asked folks what types of housing styles would they like to see in the community. And they said small apartments, mid-rise apartments, live workplaces where you could live under on top of a coffee shop or some other type of store, as well as courtyard apartments. So, a desire to see different types of housing that are in the community, but they're not very prevalent, like the single family homes that we continue to see develop. So that kind of helps, I think, cover some of, again, what we heard back again to what overall we heard that people, when we went out, said they really appreciate the work the CAC's done, would like to see more measures put in place to protect our agriculture, and that we want to be a walkable rural community. So now I'll let Janet ask any kind of questions with everything that we heard, and still have a lot more to learn.
And the thing that I find fascinating about all of this is these are things that you've actually implemented into your goals and your objectives. I mean, we've talked about many of the chapters so far. I know we still have a few more yet to cover, but in, for example, the housing chapter, a lot of what you heard is exactly what you're saying: small apartments, more accessibility for affordable housing, which we talked with Vito about when we got together last month. So you're actually listening and trying to incorporate, which isn't always what we find with local government or even government on a national scale. So I really love that you've asked the question, you're listening to the answers, and then you're doing your level best to incorporate those answers and that feedback into what this plan is going to look like moving forward.
And that's our hope. Again, that was the intent with this summer, was to make sure that we're going down the right track. We don't want to write a plan that the public does not recognize or does not support. And we're lucky to have heard from the public that they do support what's been written, and we hope that we can continue to address their ideas through all of our years of engagement into implementation too.
So what happens next? What steps are coming in the future in October, November, December, even into 2024?
So currently we're working on a series of workshops where we're going to be working with different organizations and departments and agencies on talking about implementation, making sure that what is written into the next draft of the plan are things that each agency could implement. The last thing we want is a document that will sit on the shelf. We want everyone to be bought into the process, including those who will implement it. After that, we'll be presenting a draft of the plan, either late fall or early winter. And then we'll be working through updates and changes, I think early 2024, with the CC and the Planning Commission board and all of these agencies and departments to get that final draft sometime next year.
And it's important for people to understand and realize this wasn't an overnight process to create. It's not going to be an overnight process to implement either.
For sure. And I think we're going to make sure the plan is going to be broken down, of course, in 5-year segments, as it will be updated and reviewed every 5 years. But also understanding that there's going to be things in the plan that may need to look past the 20-year mark. So we may be talking about a plan that looks to the year 2145, and ways that we, may want to say this is all the potential development or all the potential ways things could happen, but we need to do it incrementally. Can't all happen at once. Rome wasn't built in a day, and the future of Shenandoah County certainly won't be either.
Now, you've been sharing your screen with me and showing me this slide presentation, and I will keep this portion and put it up on my YouTube channel so people can watch it. But does the public have access to this slide presentation on your website or somewhere through the county?
Yeah, it's on the website now. I'll make sure it's on the Shenandoah County va.us/future page as well.
Because it really is fascinating to be able to see all of the different breakdowns and actually understand this is what people said and this is how it's going to translate into what we're going to do, and provide that historical perspective that we started off our conversation talking about.
For sure. And like I said, this has all been a long process that it's kind of come out of in a natural form with the CAC and the discussions we've had with the public, and this slideshow probably would be good for folks to look through and see the whole narrative, not just each report, but the whole narrative of how we got to be where we are today.
Awesome. Well, then I'll put links to all of that in the show notes page as well. So, Tyler, thank you for taking some time today. And again, every time we do this, I'm thinking, I wonder what he's going to teach me today. And then we're done our conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So, I am the most informed non-Shenandoah County resident probably on the planet.
Oh, I'm sure you are.
Well, I look forward to having another conversation with you in October.
I look forward to that too. Thanks again for having me on today.
I will be back tomorrow. It is ice cream day on the show, Tourism Tuesday, Luray Page County edition. I headed over to Luray last week and met up with Tydell Wilson. He is the owner of Main Street Flavors, actually has a ribbon cutting coming up later this week on Thursday. So Edison and I chatted with him for a little bit while he ate his Dippin' Dots. That was a whole thing. So tune in tomorrow, a few minutes after noon, and you'll get to hear that conversation.